Next, we're going to take up malware protection, and there are various types of malware protection. The first one we're going to take up is the firewall. We'll look at antivirus and other things after that, but the first video here on malware protection will be on the firewall. So let's get on down here to where the firewall begins, right here. Now, I think it might be a good idea to talk a little bit about the history of firewalls, how they originated, because it helps us to understand them a lot better. Firewalls came along when networking started, and particularly with the internet. If I don't request something on the internet, then I don't want things coming into my computer that I didn't ask for. So this is to block everything that I didn't ask for. That was the original idea of the firewall. It creates a barrier between my computer and other computers so that I won't receive things unless I ask for them. Now, there are a couple of different kinds of firewalls or classes of firewalls. There are network firewalls, which are typically a hardware device that is on your system, on your network somewhere, that creates a barrier for a whole group of computers on the network, so that I can now set up rules and say, for example, I don't want anything coming from gambling sites to the computers on this network. And if I want, I could even specify individual sites, or I could use some sort of content filter to do that. Some firewalls are capable of content filtering, some are not. We used to have separate content filters and firewalls. Now they tend to be kind of put together into single units, but that's a network firewall. It's not inside the computer. Now, a host firewall is actually built into the software of the computer. And most operating systems have a host firewall built into them, including Windows. Now, the thing about a host firewall is, first of all, it's important. It's important that you protect an individual computer as well as at the network level. But the downside is that by the time the packet has reached your computer, by the time it's reached that firewall, it's already in your computer. It's already there. It's better to protect it before it even gets there with a network firewall. But that doesn't mean there aren't uses for the host firewall. And in fact, if you're using a home computer, for example, that host firewall becomes very important. So most OSs will come with that firewall installed, including Windows. So a layer of software that operates between the NIC and the operating system. In other words, the operating system is built such that everything goes through the firewall before it allows it, when it comes off of the interface card, before it allows it to do anything to get into the rest of the application, the rest of the operating system, or anywhere else. It is a set of rules. There are incoming rules, and now we have even outgoing rules. I can keep my computer from talking to somebody else outgoing. Right? So I can examine in both directions, and I examine by any number of different criteria. Windows Defender Firewall is what's built into Windows. First of all, there are 3 network categories: domain networks, private networks, and guest and public networks. And we'll see those in a minute when we get to the firewall. But anytime I'm connected to a network, that network is classified as one of these types of networks, either domain, a private, or a guest or public network. Now, I'm not on a domain on my computer, so you will not see the domain network on mine. You will see private, and then you'll see guest or public. They are the same. They're treated the same as far as the firewall is concerned. So you'll see those in a moment. Just bear those in mind, that when I'm connected to other computers at home, I'm on a private network. And if I go out into public, then I connect to something on the public network category. And I can have different firewall rules set up for each of these different groups of networks. You can see them here. This particular computer has a domain, public profile, and private profile. We'll see it on mine again in a moment. As a matter of fact, let's go look at that right now. I'm just going to type firewall. And here's Windows Defender Firewall in the control panel. So I'm going to open that up. And here you'll see are my private networks, and then my guest or public networks. And right now you can see on the private network, I am actively connected to the Tree Farm network. That's my home network. I am not actively connected to any public networks right now. Right? So I can have different sets of firewall rules for each of these. Here you see for my incoming connections, I'm blocking everything except anything on this that is on the list here. And for the guest, again, anything except for what's on the list. In other words, I have whitelisted what I want to have, what I want to be filtered. I only want the things that I have said I allow to come in. Right? So in other words, I'm not blacklisting the ones I don't want in. I'm whitelisting everything that I do want in, and everything else is blocked. By the way, this Windows Defender firewall is also where you turn firewalls off and on. I would turn these off and on from here. Right? I just click that, and then I can turn it off for these various networks. Now, there is also a Windows Defender firewall with advanced security, and I can get to that here through the advanced settings. And this is it. This is where I can actually set up the rules for the various profiles. Right? So I can have different rules for each of these various profiles for incoming and for outgoing. All right, let's get back to our notes here. Configuring Windows firewalls. If a computer server is not communicating with certain applications or services, the protocol might be blocked. So this is sometimes a troubleshooting thing. I can't seem to communicate, so I need to turn off the firewall for that, or unblock the firewall for that particular communication. The default setting for incoming packets is to block them unless specifically allowed. That's called whitelisting rather than blacklisting. Installing or enable certain Windows applications or services sometimes automatically sets the necessary firewall rules for it. So in other words, when I install an application, it might automatically set firewall rules for it. In fact, many times when you're installing something, you'll see you have to give permission to set that firewall rule during that installation, at least if the whoever wrote that program decides to include that for you to give it permission. Use the Windows Defender Firewall app to allow a particular application. And again, we just saw where that was in my computer. And here you can see, is that the one we wanted? No, this is the one I wanted. That I can now choose what apps are allowed for firewall. So let me go back to my firewall here. And not this one. I wanted the regular firewall. So I'm going to go back to firewall, Windows Defender Firewall. And here, if I click allow an app or feature through Windows Defender Firewall, you can see which apps I allow through private and which apps I allow through public. And once in a while, again, when you're installing something, you get that thing, do you want to allow locally or do you want to allow everywhere? That's what's setting this. Do I want to allow only on a private network, or do I want to allow it when I'm on a public network? So that's what these settings are. And I can say, well, any of these things is allowed to communicate across the firewall. Now, this is Windows Defender Firewall with advanced security. And once again, you can set the inbound and outbound rules. So let's go back here. I'm going to back up one, go to advanced settings. And let's look at inbound rules. So here's a bunch of inbound rules. And if I want to make a new rule, I click here on new rule. And here you can see I can filter by program, by port, by some predefined rule, and then by something custom. If I click custom, for example, I can now filter here by program path. So I have several different things that I can filter by. So here again, you can see as I go down this thing, I can set by program, by protocol, or port. I haven't set any of those, but I can set the scope, the action, and so on. So I have several different things that I can set as I set up this firewall. And I'm not going to go through one right now, but you'd see I would have to define each of these items as I go, and it won't let me look at them unless I actually choose one. So I'm not going to go through that right now, but I believe you do. Let's see, do we do one in the lab? I think we do one in the lab. I'm not, yes, I believe we do one of these in the lab, so you'll see it there. All right, custom rules, and then it talks about custom rules in the rule wizard that we just took a look at. I'm not going to go into that any further than that. Here is some stuff on the Linux firewall configuration, the Mac OS firewall configuration, and so on. Well, that's the end of the firewall section. Next, we're going to look at another part of this whole application protection stuff. We're going to look at maintaining the operating system. So that will be the next video.